If you have listened to our previous episodes with Skip Lackey here on the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, then you'll be as excited as I am to have him back here today. Today is going to be talking about what he's doing these days, the Lifequake recovery program and the Touchstone Model. And with no further ado, let's get going. This is going to be good. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. All right, we are here once again with my good friend Skip Lackey. And today we're going to be learning more from Skip. This is part 3 of our interview. If you haven't listened to the other 2, I would suggest you go back and do so. Not necessarily that it has to be chronological or anything, but just because they're so interesting. But today we're going to be talking about what Skip is doing these days. First interview was kind of like reminiscing about the old days and NLP and acting and Broadway and movies and things like that. Him, not me. And then the second one was talking about the journey process. And now we're going to go into what he's doing these days, which I think, if I remember correctly, Skip, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is called the Lifequake. Is that right?
Lifequake recovery program. Working with something I've created called this Touchstone Model.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we want to hear all about that. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. What is that, and what's it for, and how do you use it, and can anybody learn it?
So where this came about was, I've been very blessed. My 20s, my 30s, my 40s were all fantastic. They were adventures, traveling, working in the healing arts and doing, traveling around teaching workshops. It was great in my 40s. And then my 50s kind of hit. And right as I was about to turn 50, I was on a trip to India, a spiritual yatra through India for a month.
A spiritual yacht trip?
Yatra.
Oh,
it's
okay.
You go to a bunch of, it's not a yacht trip, it's a spiritual yacht trip, a yatra. Through India, going to all the holy places in India. And I had come back and I had just read a book called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. His new book had just come out. And I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. And I was looking at that. I was, for those folks who've been to India or Asia, your time zone gets flipped. So I was like up in the middle of the night and I was reading this book. And one of the things it said was that, life happens in like act 1, act 2, the second act of life. And I thought to myself, well, I was in theater. We had 3-act plays. And sometimes they're, the older plays, there were 4 acts.
Or even 5.
Yeah. What happens if there's more acts than just the 2? So somehow I visualized this concept of Roman numerals of act 1. It looks like a 1, but it's an I.
Right. Yeah. It looks like a pillar maybe or something.
Yeah. It looks like a pillar or a column, but really the 1 in Roman numerals is shaped like the I. And then I started thinking, well, act 1 is when the identity, the id, the ego gets formed, right? We see that. And then what happens if you put the 2 I's together, or what does that mean? And so I started to visualize this series of Roman numerals. And what I realized is that life unfolds in all of these different acts. So over the last, say, probably 12 years, this model started unfolding more and more as I was working with my clients, where, as we all do, as we're working with people, we start to see patterns that start to show up in specific issues that start to pop up. So my question was, after working with, tens of thousands of people doing journey work and really working at trying to help people get to forgiveness, is what was, it's that old famous story where you say, you're sitting by the creek and, there's somebody floating down the river and they're going, help me, help me. So you jump in, dive in, and you swim over and you grab them and you come over and you give them, you pump their chest and give them mouth to mouth and they resuscitate. And just about the time you're finishing that one, there's 2 people floating down the river. And, oh my gosh, you jump in, you grab them, you do that. And then, before you get them resuscitated, and then there's 3 people floating down the river. Mm. It's that concept that you don't have time to go up and see that somebody is up the river on the bridge throwing people over the bridge, right? So you can stop the source. Right. I don't know, with trauma and the type of work that we do with clients and helping them, we're never going to get to the root core of the source and stop it. But what we can do is teach people how to, using the forgiveness skills like we showed in the episode 2. To me, I use those skills, and I still use all the journey skills that I was learning and was teaching for over a decade on just about every process that I work with somebody. I just think some of those skills are priceless, especially the forgiveness skills. But how can we help people move along quicker? I started saying, how can I take people and it not have to be this long drawn out period of time before I can get them to see the issue? Because so often, and this, Doug, is like when they can cognitively understand what it is, then they surrender that much easier to the process of the clearing. So I started going back and looking and saying, okay, what are the things, what were some of the tools that I find most useful for me? NLP and understanding visual, auditory, kinesthetic, the VAK aspect, and understanding the brain and the whole fight or flight situation, understanding attachment theory around relationships, really powerfully the Enneagram. I don't know if you've talked about the Enneagram at all. We
haven't talked about it on this podcast at all. It hasn't.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. So
or twice, but yeah, no, we haven't delved into it.
Okay. So for me, the Enneagram is one of the best transformation tools because just for myself, because all of a sudden I started realizing, holy crap, I'm like a chapter in a book and my behaviors are laid out very specifically. And I'll be honest with you, it pissed me off when I first saw it. Yeah. Because I thought I was special and unique, and I was this very.
You are.
Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you. You're so kind. You're so kind.
Yeah. Hey, but for the folks that don't know what that is, could you just give a 50-cent version description of?
Sure. So the Enneagram is an old teaching. Some people say it goes back to the Iliad and the Odyssey, that was an Enneagram story, but it's this universal way of looking at behavior. The concept was that the Catholic monks years ago had kind of gotten it, and then the Sufis took it. Carlos Castaneda brought it to the West.
You did?
Yeah. Ichazo, God, what was the guy's name? Castaneda helped. He didn't bring it. He was one of the people that helped kind of bring it out more to the public.
Really? I had no idea.
Anyway,
I thought I knew of it as a Sufi thing, and a lot of people think of it as like a personality typing thing. That there are 9 categories of personality.
Right. There's 9 categories. There's body points, emotion points, mind points, and there's 3 of each. And then you integrate and disintegrate to certain levels of behavior, healthy, average, unhealthy, for each of these 9 numbers. And it's picked up a lot of popularity in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, where a lot of people are now talking about it. And what I find, though, is if I know what somebody's Enneagram point is, I can really speed up the process of helping them, because I can go to their deepest fear. I can go to their biggest pushback. You use the opposite of how they're showing up, and then you can deliver the information and help that healing process with them, help them along to really see that behavior. And when they see that it's hardwired in them, because it's like, why do I do what I do? right? That's the question that someone, why do I do this? Well, you're kind of hardwired to act and react like that. So if we can get you to understand mentally and then really clear the root core of where that came from so that you can stop and be mindful of your experiences, it makes all the difference in the world for somebody really surrendering to the process of the healing. And recently, because of my own personal experience of going through what I call Lifequakes, a series of Lifequake situations.
Sorry about that.
And that's okay. And when I say Lifequakes, I read a book not too long ago that said that we have 3 to 5 major Lifequakes during our lifetime that will last up to 4 to 6 years. And a Lifequake can be something along the lines of a death of a loved one. It can be a divorce or the loss of a relationship. It can be where you got fired, a major upheaval. We'll have about 30 to 36 life transitions during a lifetime, but 3 to 5 of these will knock you to the ground, where you have to really pick yourself up, and it's a process. So I started saying, well, what if I could speed that process up? Even though, a lot of people say you can't speed up that time. We know that we can. If somebody really wants to, they can move along through it pretty quickly. So I took this Touchstone model that I had been working on and said, what if I could help people really see the core of where their pain came from and take this nonlinear life experience that is like this big ball of yarn and straighten it out and make it linear, just so that they could see where they're at on this process. Because as soon as they're not with you, right, it's like a rubber band. You can pull a rubber band if it's twisted and it'll go straight. But then when you let go of it, you know how it balls back up again? That's the way I think life is. Mm-hmm. It's just, everybody's under so much stress. So what if we could pull it apart? They could see it. And then when they were not with us, as a practitioner, which is most of the time, right? They can't follow us around to help them, to help point that out, that they could see it themselves. So it's like giving people these touchstones that they could come back to and go, oh, I'm doing that behavior. Oh, I'm in that part of my pain. Oh, this is what I'm doing in relationship, and this is why, so they could stop, look, and listen, and really catch themselves in the moment and be more mindful.
Yeah. Wow, that's really
cool.
That
was what the whole. Yeah.
I love that idea of the mind, of the Lifequake, because that's so true. My goodness heavens, it's those things happen. It's not a question of if.
It's when. I mean, during my 50s, I stopped teaching the journey, right? I took a break from that. So that was like 10 years of my life, and doing, oh my God, we were doing about 100 workshops a year that I was either doing or producing. Wow. I went through a divorce. I had an illness where I picked up a bug on that trip to India, and I had this chronic cough and this inflammation response that I was working on, but there was something deeper that wasn't quite letting me get to the core of what it was. And it took a while for me to really untangle that to get to it. I had another business that I had raised money on, and I had a partner that had 4 strokes and went blind, partially blind. And I mean, it was devastating. And it was a rough decade for me. And so all of these tools developed out of how can I help myself, and how can I take some of the people that I've trained up or a few other practitioners that I trust, love, and respect, and have them help me through my own Lifequakes. So this isn't a concept this came from a need of experience for myself.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I found this helping me pull myself out in this understanding. So if I can just go, if you'd be interested and you think the folks would be interested, I can kind of talk through this concept of this Touchstone program.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. So just going back to, is the Enneagram that you're talking about, is the Enneagram part of this process, or is that?
so what I've done is I've kind of identified a series of skills that I think for anyone life-wise, that the Enneagram should be part of their training for life skills.
So you think it's like an essential coaching skill, as an example?
I think it's absolutely. I think it's an essential coaching skill, and I use it with every single one of my clients, and because it just helps me hone in on what their core fixation is and what their biggest pain point is. And so I'll explain it to them and then help them through it to get to the root core. So when that pain point starts to show up and they're responding, they understand why they're responding. They don't have to take it personally. Their ego doesn't fight it.
So
and they're able to stop, look, and listen.
So it would be useful for a person to have this, but it's not necessarily like a prerequisite for learning to do the Lifequake Touchstone process.
Is it a prerequisite? That's a really good question. Doug, I fold the Enneagram into everything. So it's not a prerequisite to learning. It's a part of it. Like I had a leadership program. That was a big part of the leadership program that we did. It's a big part of the journey. It's now become a big part of everything that I do.
Wow.
And every client, I highly recommend people diving into it. And a lot of the information, there's a lot of people out there that I don't think are necessarily teaching it. They're teaching it as just behavior when it's something deeper.
Yeah, so it's behavior, it's personality typing, but I've also looked in it a little deeper so that it's, I was taught that it was kind of these are ego fixations, these different things, and that the ability to, I love this way of phrasing it, to end the trance of these ego fixations, to end the trance, meaning to transcend this transcend it. Yeah. And so that you can get beyond it and move to the next level from that. So that's the way I learned about the Enneagram.
And which is very true. And for me, one of the things that I realized is that, there's no good and bad Enneagram point. If, wherever you fall, you come into life facing one of 9 directions. And what had happened for me was, the reason I found it so powerful is I realized everybody's in their own little private hell trying to get by.
Right, exactly.
Right. We're all kind of locked into, like you're talking about, in that trance of thinking that your ego is better than somebody else's ego and how you're responding is special and unique. It's not. And so for me, it was like, oh, my dad did those things to me when I was a kid. He didn't realize it. It wasn't personal. The way that my mom responded to me wasn't personal. The way that first girlfriend, when I got dumped, of course, that was part of her fixation, not personal.
Right.
The reason, not personal. It really comes down to that it's like, you can't help it. And so there's something really freeing about that. I'm not saying it lets people off the hook for their lack of compassion and kindness. And yeah, there's a total responsibility, but where does that fall? So I started trying to unwind this concept. So let me
just stop you one more second. If a person wanted to learn the Enneagram, if there was a particular book or whatever, is there a place?
Anything from Riso and Hudson, RISOHUDSON. There's probably 150 books on the Enneagram.
Right. And
Helen Palmer, her books are good, I find. But Riso and Hudson, there's a book called I think it's called The Complete Wisdom in the Enneagram, or The Wisdom in the Enneagram. It's a blue workbook. It's older. It's probably 15 years old, 12 or 15 years old. I still use that as the core, because there's a lot of people who are writing all these different books.
Right.
Eli Jackson Bear has a real spiritual book on.
That's the one that I read, is the Eli Jackson Bear book.
And his is great. He comes about it from a very spiritual standpoint. So I really resonate with what he shares in his book too. I probably read, 40 or 50 books, and I find that the early ones were more true to the model. And now it's become this, what Starbucks drink would you get if you were an Enneagram type 4? I'm like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, that's very important, though. That's a very good application.
If you were a 4 on the Enneagram, it would be important. Yeah, that would be an inside joke for somebody that knows the Enneagram. So it's a big part of what I do, but it's not. I just think it's an essential coaching skill, and maybe there's a fourth episode.
Oh no!
Okay. All right. So if I can, do you want me to go ahead and start to?
No, yes, please do. I want to hear all about this. So you're people at home will not be able to see this, but you are going to be sharing your screen in a moment and showing me a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. But you're going to talk through it as if we're talking to somebody who can't see the PowerPoint. So.
Yeah, obviously you can't see it, but in the journey, one of the things that we talked about is when we come into life, we come in as this. When we're born, we're this shining diamond with all these different facets. And through life's trials and tribulations, stuff happens. And instead of learning how to keep our diamond clean, we start to cover it up with more and more of the brown stuff that happens in life. And then we form it into something that looks like a diamond, but it's not. It's got this hardened veneer, which we would call ego to it. And so part of the work that I feel like I've always done is to help people crack that hardened veneer, that outer ego shell, to open up, to get back to the root core of who they were at their very essence. So this model that I've created, just so the listeners can really get a better idea of it and kind of have a mental image as I'm going through this, is built around Roman numerals. So you've got the Roman numeral 1. And if you think about it, it looks like the letter I. The Roman numeral 2 is 2 I's as ones, then 3, right? You got 4, that's the I, and the V for the 5. So I'll try to help you visualize this, because the model, as part of the understanding, is built around the visualization of those letters, or the number. So I went back to the beginning. I tried to unwind this and make this linear process. So the Roman numeral 1, if you look at it, the I, it really is about, it happens through this stage of life, through when you're in the womb, through about age 12, when your brain waves, you go from delta, theta, alpha, and you go into beta waves, right at the end of age 12, approximately. And so this first stage is the formation of the identity. Everything that you've done, you've experienced, is all imprinted on you during that time. So the id, the ego, the identity is formed. Stage 2 in life, which is the Roman numeral 2, which is the 2 I's, is the ego has been formed, which is the first series of identities. And that's about 13 to around 25. And I share that it's around 25 because I've been doing a lot of reading recently that says that your brain is still forming through the age of 25. And also that they're now saying, these neuroscientists over in England are now saying that you're in adolescence through age 25. It's because of the brain formation. And they've got all this now, this new neuro brain data that shows it's still forming, right? So you're still not making your best decisions necessarily until after around age 25. And again, these are approximations, but so that phase is your identity is now turned into ego. And during that second set between age 13 and 25, the next I is, how do I connect with other people's, ego? So how I'm going around, I've got these identities, the identities are bumping into each other, which is where I think that understanding, if we taught kids about NLP and VAK, and really to understand how to find rapport with other people, there would be a lot of these painful experiences that we had growing up with the awkwardness of that we might be, I'm not saying we'll fully bypass it, but we could certainly help. So then you go through this period, and I'm going to call it stage 3, which is around, for some people, it's when they graduate from college, around that time. If they don't, they're out in the world. And what I find is you have these 3 stages. So that stage 3, I, right? Or 1, 1, 1. The first one is you find a career or you find a job, something that you can do that holds your time. Then once you've kind of settled into that, you find a partner or a loved one that you can spend some of your time with. And again, these are generalizations. And then eventually, with that partner, some people choose to become parents and have children. So it's 1, 2, 3. So your primary focus is your career. And then your primary focus, of the second of those, of that Roman numeral 3, is with your partner. And that becomes your primary relationship. Or if you become a parent, kind of shifts. Anybody that's a parent knows that they have to spend a ton of time and energy, and their children take precedent almost over everything else if there was an emergency. So this is the development. These real first 3 phases of development can happen over a long period of time until what happens? Somebody gets into, at some point, they have what I would refer to as a lifequake. So if we look at Roman numeral 4, it's the 1, right? The I, which is this crisis, and the V for 5 as the Roman numeral is almost like this cup, this chalice. It's the golden chalice, right? It's this connection with our source, with God, with truth, with the universe, whatever you want to call it. But there's this great big wall in the formation of that I that's right before the V on the number 4. And if your listeners, if you've got a pen, you could even draw that out and kind of get a better idea of what this looks like. But I think a lot of people get stuck there and they think, well, this is just life, and I'm supposed to focus on my career, being a partner and parent, if that's what it is. And they have this lifequake and they don't move forward because they don't either have the skills, or it doesn't catapult them forward, or they don't have that motivation. And so they end up spending a good portion of their life stuck at level 4. And some of us, though, recognize there's something on the other side. Don't know what that is yet, but I know that there's something else over there. And so if you go to level 5, you think about it as that cup, right? That V, that we're looking to fill up our cup. What is that? That's a connection. Source, creator, God, nature, spirit, love, soul, whatever that might be. And I look at it as, in religion, so many different religious aspects show the golden chalice, and that represents the filling up with cup with spirit. Once you connect with spirit, things start to shift and change. But the problem is, or the reality of the moment is, that lifequake crisis and all of that formation that is kind of in that 1 before the V, before you got connected. Once you're connected and you've had that experience, and through the journey, we were helping people really connect with their essence and connect with that deepest part of them through dropping through those levels of emotion that we talked about in the previous episode. But now that identity is now just on the other side of the connection. So all that shit that was there on the other side is now, okay, I'm connected, but now what? Now I have to go back and unwind and figure out who the hell I am and what my identity is and my connection to self. So that's where I think, let me make this a little bit bigger, Doug, so you can see that a little bit.
Me squinting at the screen here, yeah.
Yeah, I can see you squinting at the screen. So this is the identity and the connection to self. Now, this is where I think that the Enneagram plays a big part in really fully understanding who you are and what you're about. And being able to see it's not personal. We're in our own little private hell trying to get by, but it gives us it's almost like a template for behavior that I find that I can help clients really see. It's a shortcut. Okay. And yeah, that's why I use it. Now, if we look at level 7, it's the V with the 2 I's. And just like level 2, which was the formation of the ego and then how to connect with others, I think level 7 is, okay, I'm connected. And now I've got this ego. And now I'm trying to figure out, how do I really connect with others at their core, and from a place of a deeper level of connection. Okay. Now, here's where it starts to shift. Once we've gone through 5, which is connection with spirit, 6, which is connection with spirit and connection, understanding the self, 7, which is the V and connecting with others, then we go into this level 8. And I looked at level 8 and I said, well, what if I turn that kind of on its side, didn't look at it as a Roman numeral, but looked at it as the number 8, which then turned on its side is the infinite. It's the sign for infinity, right? So really our life practice becomes about, how do I just rest in the infinite and let life happen in the flow? And that becomes my practice. Is all of everything that's there, right? This level 8 in life is about saying what do we practice? And I kind of identified the understanding of these unconscious programs that got set up in 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Understand the Enneagram, which is really a behavior and a core ego fixation. How do I communicate better? Through connection, mindfulness, emotional intelligence. How do I work on my relationships? I think attachment theory. I learned so much about my own pain. And I wish I had learned that earlier in life. I probably would still be married if I understood a little bit better at the time. And I kind of jumped over it. We spend so much more of our waking time at work than we do at home. How do we fulfill ourselves at work through self-awareness? Because self-esteem, I'm just reading a book recently is talking about it. It had one statement that I just went, that's really true, which is most people suffer from a low self-esteem, like 98% of people, 95 to 98%. And he said, you can't build up self-esteem. It's kind of a misnomer. What we're really doing is building self-awareness. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, God, that's really true. It's more about self-awareness than it is about building up this ego that you can confront things. It's about being in self-awareness to go, oh, look who I am. Look how I'm being. Look what's showing up. What do I need to do? What's the reality of the moment, right?
Yeah. So that's an acceptance then, isn't it?
Yeah. It's self-awareness, self-acceptance, right? Of what is, right? Yeah. And I think that the self-acceptance is the first step, and then self-awareness is the next step up, because the awareness that you have through the acceptance of, well, this is what it is. And then what am I going to do about it? And the awareness of saying, how are others responding? How am I, rather than just going forward like a narcissist and then, bowling people over, because there's certain Enneagram points, that's their modus operandi. That's how they do it.
So let me just stop you. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I get this. I get what you're saying so far, and it's funny how you went to the left the Roman numerals to get to the,
to the 8, to the infinity sign. Yeah,
you're a cheater there. I can tell you couldn't think of what to do with the 3 eyes after the 5. So that's okay. That's okay. I like the idea of flow. To me, the idea of pursuing happiness is kind of a misnomer. I don't know if that's the right word, misnomer, but to me, finding flow is really where it's at in life. That, it's not happy like, oh boy, I'm doing this now, but it's just like you're engaged, you're focused, you're fulfilled by this flow that you're in, this practice that you're in. So I can really see where this is. I resonate with what you're saying here. This is beautiful. My question is, what if somebody doesn't make it through that Lifequake, that 4?
Yeah. And that happens for I think a big majority of people. They don't, because they don't know what's going on. They don't have this bigger picture. So what happens is they stay stuck at level 4. They don't connect to spirit, or they kind of do, but they don't know how to do it on a regular basis. So they don't do the self-awareness work. They don't maybe meditate, stay connected. They don't have some kind of spiritual practice that works for them. And I'm not here to
is that where you would start working with somebody? Is that if they're stuck at level 4? I mean, how does this work as a sort of template for coaching? How do you?
Okay. So I'm gonna go forward a second, then I'll back up.
Okay,
so
good.
What I find is people, they get stuck at level 4 and they spend their 30s, their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and then all of a sudden they start facing their mortality, and they start looking, and they don't go through 5, 6, 7, and 8. They jump to level 9. So visualize for a second level 9, which is this big X, which is the 10, which is the I in front of it. So now their identity, their ego is right in front of this X marks the spot of their mortality.
Being X'd out is the mortality.
X'd out, yeah. So, Doug, I'll do this for you real quick. Hang on one second so that you can see this, and then we can, I can share. I've got this. So the people at home, while I'm doing this, I have this really intense slide, and it's got about 150 animations on it. So I'm going to jump forward so I can kind of show this. So when they go to level 9, they start to face their mortality, and it scares the crap out of people. Now, in our society, we don't talk about death.
Right.
Death is inevitable. It is part of the experience. We need to learn. I don't think personally, and this comes through some of my spiritual practices, and I've studied all kinds of things. I think until you learn how to face death and recognize, hey, my time is running out every day, and I'm not trying to be morbid about it, but every day is one day closer to a day that you're not going to be here. So what are you going to do today? What's your focus?
And you mentioned Carlos Castaneda earlier. One of my influences back in the 20s was Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan and stuff. And he said that to be a warrior, you need to have death as your ally. Death is your ally. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's all,
we don't talk about it.
It's been a big part of it. And it's people have thought that I'm morbid. People have thought that I'm like, what are you talking about death for? But I've been doing this since my dad died on my 21st birthday. That might have been an influence. That might have been an influence.
Mine died I was 23, died in a plane crash. And it made me stop and think, what am I doing? I'm in the arts. What difference does this make? What am I going to leave? Why am I here? And it really forced me at a really young age. Yeah. And that's how I got into NLP, right? I mean, I was already in it, but I got into it very soon, but my dad died not too long after I started learning about it.
Wow.
So thank God I had some of that in my early days to be able to then say, okay, well, how do I want to take this out into my life? So my mother, who had been a nurse and a therapist, when she passed away about 1.5 years ago, and I had these my mom was an amazing woman. She was a Tibetan Buddhist, and I got she and I would talk about this all the time. Well, my mother, when she passed away, had over 200 books that she had collected in her library on death and dying.
Wow. And
she had passed hundreds of people in a nursing home when she was in her 20s, and she was fascinated with death. So we had these. And as she was facing her mortality, I have to just tell this quick story.
Okay.
Because I think this is really important around mortality and facing it as far as our own personal growth is concerned. But when she was 84, she had an aneurysm. She knew that it couldn't be fixed. And at some point she could die at any moment. And she was pissed off. And she spent all these years, 40, 50 years as a Tibetan Buddhist. I was like, Mom, aren't you going to fall back on your practice? The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. She had like 5 copies, and I had read it multiple times. I'm not Buddhist, but and it's an amazing book of really looking at it. And she was like, when you get to be my age and you start to face your mortality, you'll be fucking pissed off too. And I was like, Mom, and it was really interesting. But here's the thing, Doug, if we look at this X, X marks a spot, right? That's a mortality. People start to face it. They're in fear of it. But if we look at it in the big picture, what is the X? If we take the X, it's just fear, right? And what's it a fear of? It's a fear of death, and it's a fear that our time is running out. And so if you take the X and you place the hourglass concept over it, and things are running out, it turns into this bigger image of the X. So our time is running out. So what do we do with the time, right? If we just take away this concept of this fear and we remove the fear and we stand in the middle of it, then we can actually take some action, and we can take it from a place of consciousness, right? Towards being present. We can consciously accept our mortality, and then we can live in that flow, in that infinite, from this enhanced place of growth interaction with ourselves and others. So then, if we look at the X, which is 10, and now the I for number 11 is on the other side of facing this big milestone of accepting the fact of our mortality. So the I, which is at 1, it's at 6, now is at 11. And we're going to learn how to be in the flow and move beyond that. And the 12 is the X and the 2 I's. How do we do that with others, right? Once we accept our mortality, and then how we integrate it in all aspects of our life and be in the flow. Because that's level 13. Now level 14, because all of this is interconnected, comes when we actually are facing our mortality. And we've got the X for 10, the 1 and the V for number Roman numeral 14. So you've got the X, which is the concept of death that we've moved beyond, the 1, which is the I, the identity, and the V for 14 really is about learning how to know that our time is running out and that we're connected to our source. So instead of getting stuck again, like at level 4, at level 14, we're staying connected. And so that's a given. And then the consciousness comes when we can actually remember that we're spirit, we're energy. There's nothing to fear. We don't know what's on the other side, because when we all cross over, nobody really knows what's over there. If there is anything, I'd like to think I know, but if we spend our life not connected, then what's there? But see, most people, they get stuck at level 4. They go, what the hell am I doing? I have no idea. I stay stuck there. And then they stay in confusion. They miss their opportunity for growth through all of this awareness. And they just slide down. Again, they face 9, right? They go into their 70s, their 80s. They face death. This big fear is there. And they don't have connection. So if they don't have any of this connection, they miss all of this learning. And all they're doing is feeling lost and uncertain. They have a certain level of pain and suffering that they've developed their own skills on how to deal with it. And that can be alcohol, addiction, all kinds of just activity, because the fear is there that they don't want to feel. So this is what we do with the journey, is we help people feel their emotions, own it, be emotionally intelligent about it, and heal the old pain triggers. Right? That's what we're doing with all the work and all these different modalities. So if we take that away, the pain, suffering, the fear, the feeling of loss and uncertainty, right? Then what we can do is we can get back to the idea that we are this shining diamond. And how do I connect with that part of myself that is perfect? Because it's all there for each one of us. Yeah. So for me, this whole practice is about coming back to core.
You had a lot of fun with this slide, man. The animations you've been doing is pretty impressive.
I spent a lot of time and energy on that, trying to visualize it for myself, to come up with these ideas of, and all of this it all just kind of unfolded, and it would just be there, and it would be, oh, wow, this really falls right into line. Originally, which is 10. And then it turned into, 16. So life happens to all of us. But when we can get real and heal the pain from the past and unwind this, then we can look forward to it. Because I always tell people, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you're going, every road will get you there. So part of this is about saying, what's my path? How do I want to look at things? So again, when you ask me, is the Enneagram an integral part of it? Yes, it is, but it's a lifetime study. I mean, I still read books on the Enneagram. When a new Enneagram book comes out, I try, anytime I can pick up a little skill here or there to help a client. And I figure if I'm being drawn to it, it's something that I need to see for myself and for others, right?
Have you read the book by Annie Linden about NLP and the Enneagram?
No, I have not. I don't know that one. I have to read that.
Annie Linden ran the New York Center, or whatever it was called, for NLP back in the 80s. And I took some courses from her, but she wrote a book about NLP and the Enneagram, which was good. It's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. The Eli Jackson spoke to me more than it did, but it was very good.
I did a live course, Eli, probably back in the late 80s. Cool. When he's just teaching it, and I did a weekend with him and got a lot out of it. That was a big introduction. That was my introduction to it, was through Eli.
Okay, cool. Nice. Was that in Colorado?
Yeah. That was in California. I think on a trip to California, I saw that he was teaching something. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. God, that was
it's interesting that, speaking about death for a moment, the Stoicism has really come back. It's hot right now. It's trendy.
Yeah.
Stoicism, which is interesting because it's been around for what, 2,000, 3,000 years or something.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they have is I think it's called Memento Mori calendar.
Yes.
It's basically it represents your whole life, the approximation of at least, maybe it's got 80 years on this chart. Maybe there's, I don't know, maybe there's 100, I don't know. But each circle on this chart represents a month. And so one line of circles is a year. And so you just go in and you fill in these circles for every year that you've lived. And it, pretty well shows you that half this chart is filled up by now, or more than half of the chart is filled up, depending on where you are in this thing. So it leads, of course, to death. And, it's important to live your life as if what this is an important day. It's, you won't get this one again. This is something you want to use and take advantage of and enjoy every moment. One of the things that I also think about, however, sometimes is that there's a quote by the woman that started the Shakers, Mother Ann Lee, I think her name was. And I had it on my bulletin board for years. I don't actually know where it is right now, but it was a little slip of paper I bought at the Shaker Museum in Lenox, Massachusetts or something. But basically what she's saying in this thing is she says, do your work, live every day as if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as if you knew you're going to live for 1,000 years.
Oh,
I like that kind of.
That addition to that. Yeah, it really brings it, I want to say, not into the positive, it brings it in a different realm of because we are on some level, right? The energy of whatever that is.
What I like to think of is that, if I was going to die tomorrow, then I wouldn't work. I wouldn't, do a podcast. What the hell?
Right.
I'm going to go out and get drunk, or, just go to stream, or I'm going to party, I'm going to just do something. I'm going to die tomorrow. Why not? That's do everything that we're not supposed to do. Let's go have banana split for lunch, whatever. It's just, if I was going to die tomorrow, why not? But if I'm going to also live for 1,000 years, then I'm going to, make a really good podcast here. And this is something that I can, give to other people and spread this awareness and knowledge to the humanity. I want to do this. We're going to be around for a while. I'm gonna make this chair. If I'm a carpenter, I'm gonna make this chair really, really well. Shaker furniture is great furniture because they lived like this. They made this stuff to last. They didn't just say, let's knock out a chair, it'll be okay. No, they made it right. They made it perfect. Right. Shaker boxes are a gorgeous piece of,
Right.
So I like that idea of living, fully engaged in the moment. Like, wow, this is beautiful. I love this moment. Talking to my friend Skip, having this, living in this beautiful place. It's great being right here, right now, and living for 1,000 years is a cool, both and situation.
Well, it really makes you think about the big picture for not just ourselves, but for future generations. And it's funny that you're saying that about, I love that quote. And there's a quote that I've had up on my mantle for 30 years. And it was a little thing that I found somewhere. And it was a quote from Buddha. And it just says, his dying words, do your best. And I've gone back and read to see if that was really true. And basically what he said, that's if it was just boiled down to it, that's what he said on his deathbed, was telling people to do their best. And there's something about that is just so simple. And I pass this on to my kids, right? I have 3 children. And I, when something happens, I go, and they're upset about it, I go, did you do your best? Did you do your best work? Did you felt that you were doing your best? If you did, then that's perfect. Because that's all you can do. Because we're not going to know, there's no perfection. It's like we've heard practice makes perfect. And I read somewhere that it's like, no, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And so you strive for that. But as long as you're doing your best, then you're doing your best work. And that's what I try to get across to my clients is do this so that you have a foundation of understanding and a foundation of not being triggered. And you can unwind this very complex thing. It is you, it's us, right? And we try to do our best. So if you've made a mistake, in hindsight, it's easy to see that. But in the moment, we're being triggered and we're falling outside of what, you can look back on it and say, hey, that was a messy situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Do your best.
So let me ask you, Skip, the this Lifequake model, this thing that you showed us today, is this just a way of thinking about the process, or is there an actual process like the journey process that you specifically do with people these days, or how does this?
Right. So those forgiveness skills that we talked about in the previous episode, I use that. So I think it's about resolving. So I go back in. The model that I use, I do 3 sessions with the client, and I also spend about an hour to explain this model to them, talk them through so they can see where they're at on this linear progression.
Okay.
Then we go back in and we dig in and say, okay, what are your major pain points from your childhood? So we go back in and do journey style work. And I throw the kitchen sink at people because I'm doing belief changes, vow changes, doing the deep forgiveness work, doing the connection work where we're getting people to connect with their spirit. So then they have afterwards, I give them some homework, through guided meditations that I've created that I give to them, they can do until our next session. Then the second session builds on going back in, because oftentimes, inevitably, if they've got a real big lifequake situation, there's something that they need to look at right then. But we really need to clear stuff from our childhood, our mothers and fathers and grandparents and things that happened to us as a kid. We'll clear a lot of that. And then I take them into the third one to get them back to their center if they've had these big, really deep lifequakes. And maybe it's forgiveness with somebody that's passed, forgiveness with self. And then they're getting back, and I'm doing some other work to get them to be able to lift them up to where they can see a compelling future. And then they can move forward from there. So I find that when people have had a major lifequake, within 3 or 4 weeks, you can get them back on track. So it doesn't have to take 3 to 5 years. It could take 3 to 5 sessions max, and they get them back, to the point where they're on a positive way of looking at their life again, and they can see some compelling future.
So just going back to your mother for a moment, do you think that she just, you said she was so pissed off about this mortality thing. Knowing what you know now, could you have done a like a Lifequake session with her and gotten to a place where she wasn't so pissed off?
Well, I was doing this type of work then because my mom just passed away about a year
Or
and
a
a
couple
half
of years
ago.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And it happened during COVID, right when COVID started. She didn't die from COVID, but because of COVID, because they wouldn't admit her to the hospital.
Oh my God, really?
They refused to admit her to the hospital, and they basically took her to the emergency room, pushed her home, and she died at home. So I was with her in January before COVID started. She tried to have an operation to fix this aneurysm, and they couldn't do it. And so she and I had these long, long talks. And this is where this came out of when she said, I'm angry. I said, Mom, what's going on? So I remember the night before I left, I'd been with her for like 3 weeks because she had a surgery that wasn't successful. And I just laid next to her and I, kissed her and laid there and said, I know that you can pass at any moment. And I want you to know that I'm going to get emotional just thinking about it. How much, how much you've meant to me, and that you've been the best mother that I could ever ask for, and best friend. She and I had become very close friends, and a mentor and a guide. And she was always there for me. So I literally, before I left, said, if I don't see you in body again, we only talk on the phone and something should happen. I want you to know how I really feel. So I'm because my dad died like yours. I talked to him the night before. He's gone the next day. We know we can lose somebody. I tell everybody I know how much I love them. But if I don't get to see you again, I'm not trying to be morbid, but it can happen. And I want you to know how I feel. Hence I'm in Bellingham, Washington. You can see out the window as the sun starts to come up, right? We're doing this really early. And I'm here with a friend who's been my friend for 43 years. He was my partner in the circus. Nice. And I just turned 60. So it's a milestone birthday. We were talking about that. And he flew out here. We spend milestone birthdays with each other.
Cool.
So, yeah. So
that's funny because I thought that was a wall behind you, but now it's a window. It looks really, really pretty.
Overlooking the, it's gorgeous. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Skip, we'll have to do this again sometime.
So always lots to talk about.
Thank you so much. This is great. This is really great. This is really good. All 3 episodes have been spectacular, and I really appreciate you sharing with us, man.
Well, it's been fun to reconnect with you, Doug. And obviously I'm passionate about the work that I do and being able to help. And I'm constantly, the older I get, the more I realize I don't know, and I'm trying to figure it out along with everybody else. But, this has sped up the effectiveness of the work that I do with clients immensely.
Is there a place where people can see this video presentation that you just did for me? The slides. Is there a way? Does it exist?
Yeah,
somewhere?
There is. If you go to YouTube, and look up Life-Quake, not one word Lifequake, but Life-Quake, and Skip Lackey, it'll show up on YouTube.
Okay.
And there's about an hour-long presentation, which I go into great detail about it. And the beginning of it's talking about what Lifequakes are. So it's kind of my work. And then there's another one. There's 2 videos. There's that one, Life-Quake and Skip Lackey. And then if you look up the ACE test, Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE test, Skip Lackey, there's another 57-minute video where I give the ACE test, a resilience test, the PCE, positive childhood experience test, which is a new thing that's just come out in the last couple of years for resilience.
Wow.
And it's built around that. So I made those videos, to just be able to give to people and the information. So it's there.
Fantastic.
I hope people take it and use it.
We teach ACE in our havening trainings, but I love those other things as well. Positive childhood experiences. I'm going to look for that. Thank you so much.
I found a resilience test online because I was like, I score 4 to 4.5 on the ACE test. Oh. And I had this
out of 10. That's a lot. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I've worked with clients that score 10 out of 10 and 9 out of 10.
I know.
Yeah. And so what is it? Above a 6, it cuts off 20 years off your life. So, when I scored the score that I did, and I was struggling with this lung stuff that that I was talking about. I had this, I went, oh my God, it's gotta be because of some of the stuff I had happen in my childhood that I'm having to, heal. So it really helped me see, oh, that's what's going on. So I showed this with certain clients that are dealing with long-term health issues. And I find that they relax and go, oh, that's why. Now I can work on it.
Cool. Nice. Well, thank you. That's exciting. I'm going to YouTube next. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, great. Well, listen, happy birthday and all those things, and have a wonderful stay out there in Bellingham.
Yeah, here for a couple days. Yeah.
Very nice. And safe trip back.
Thanks. And thanks for doing this, Doug. I appreciate it. And I'm sure your listeners are getting a ton out of everything. I think, you're just giving back to the community in such a big way. Thank you for the work that you do too.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being here.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want any more information about today's show, please visit our website at www.essentialcoachingskills.com. Be sure to tune in again next week for our next episode and discover even more about the systems and the secrets that set the best apart.